Much. Now, we've asked three economists to join us and give us their assessment of whether we are indeed on the right track and to bring with them their favourite statistic of the moment on the British economy. They are Julie Meyer, who's founder and CEO of the investment firm Ariadne Capital, Megan Greene from Rubini Global Economics, and Dr. Stephanie Blankenberg from the School of Oriental and African Studies. Megan, first, what is the one fact that you think we should look at that might help us put some of this into perspective?
Yeah, sure. I've chosen the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing and for services to look at the UK economy because you'll notice it's upticked in the past 2 months. And it's one of a few indicators that have started looking up in December and January. And that, alongside with the external environment and the improvement in that, the idea that actually the Eurozone might not implode this year, make me a little bit more positive about the UK economy, make me think that we may actually avoid a technical recession.
So, I mean, many people won't even have heard of it. Why is that important?
Well, you'll notice there's a line at 50, and anything above 50 indicates an expansion in output, and it's for manufacturing and services. Anything below 50 is a contraction. So, you know, in 2009, for example, we had a massive contraction. We'd just gone above the 50 line, and that's significant. Industrial production is another measure that also shows a slight improvement. Now, are these reasons to become very bullish on the UK? Absolutely not. It's only a few months of data that's been better, but it is a reason to maybe think that the UK might avoid a recession.
Stephanie, you were one of those economists who signed the letter saying there should be a plan B. The Chancellor's got to change his view. So what have you picked for us? What do you think is important?
I've picked consumer confidence.
Which will magically appear eventually?
Yeah.
Or perhaps it won't.
Hope so. There it goes.
Well, that's kind of clear, isn't it? It's going down.
I think it is rather clear, unfortunately. And so I'm more interested in the cause rather than the effect. In the end, production will go up or down depending on what entrepreneurs can sell.
So, I mean, why is consumer confidence? I mean, what does that actually measure? That measures the way we think things are going to go.
Well, it measures ordinary people's economic situation. So it measures the effect of unemployment, it measures loss of income, and it measures additionally overall perceptions of where the economy is going.
Julie, you're an entrepreneur. What did you pick for us?
I picked a chart that represents Nesta, the UK's innovations agency. They've done some research on the vital 6%. So basically, it's we're showing here in this chart that 6% of all UK firms, which are defined as high growth, that's 20% growth or more, 6% create more than 50% of all net new jobs. So if we're concerned about net new jobs, if we're concerned about creating the industries of the future, then we're going to pay attention to those vital 6%, the high growth companies. For example, what's an example of that? Yesterday, Monetize, a mobile banking company, gave its interim results. 7 years ago, that company was an idea. Today, it's worth $500 million. Today it's employing 400 people, and it's just going to continue to grow, grow, grow. They're operating on 4 continents. We have great companies. We should have thousands of those.
Is that underpinned or not underpinned by the fact that banks are either prepared to lend or not lend? I mean, in other words, that's where it all comes from, isn't it?
No, I think what's much more important than bank lending, because Monetize, led by Alistair Lukes, didn't get where it is today because of bank lending. It got work because of an exceptional entrepreneur. Now, how do we breed more exceptional entrepreneurs? One thing that we can affect in this country, unfortunately, small businesses subsidize big companies. Big companies can do deals with HMRC like Vodafone and Goldman Sachs and get out of paying tax. They can restructure and go to Dublin, whatever. Small companies are stuck here. They have to pay the tax rate. If we really believe that the 6% drives the 54% of net new jobs, these guys should be paying extremely low taxes.
One of the few things that most of the politicians agree with is this question of where is the growth going to come from? It's got to be a growth agenda somehow. But how do you get there? Who's right about that, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, the UK is trying to stage its recovery on the back of shifting demand from domestic demand to exports, and that's where the UK is extremely exposed because 40% of its exports are going to the Eurozone, and the Eurozone is obviously, you know, embroiled in crisis, and we'll see it continue for years to come. So that's a huge risk for the UK economy. So
where do you see growth coming from?
I would see growth coming from a thought-through long-term industrial policy for this economy. So the UK for very many decades is vulnerable on the side of its external trade and exports, and it certainly, as Megan quite rightly is saying, is so right now in terms of what is happening in the Eurozone. The only long-term view out is a substantial industrial policy that will help precisely, in my view, the small and medium enterprise basis, but perhaps also go beyond this to some extent.
But, the world's not top-down anymore. The world's bottom-up. And it's happening bottom-up entrepreneurship around the globe. So you cannot dictate industrial policy. The good news is that those businesses are being set up and are taking off like wildfire.
But
more and more monetizes.
You can
dictate tax policy. That's one thing that we can control. Exactly. And so we should be controlling that. And so if we believe the 6%, we should be making sure that these companies are existing in a frictionless surface. Frictionless.
On the big issue we've tried to get to tonight, which is who's right about cutting too far and too fast? I mean, where do you come down on that?
I think it's a fine line to walk. I've always thought that the UK's austerity package should have been more backloaded so that the harder measures bit much later so that you could have a better chance for an economic recovery before they really bite. But like I said, I think we might avoid a recession, so I don't think it's been catastrophic for the UK economy.
But you think, on balance, slightly too far, too fast?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you think?
I think it was entirely wrong from the start. I do not think there's a historical example for austerity policies being applicable in times of recession. There clearly was a recession because of systemic failure of the private financial sector.
So you're saying austerity leads to austerity?
Austerity leads
doesn't lead to growth. It
leads
doesn't
to
lead
the impoverishment of the majority of people.
And I don't call this austerity. I call it living within our means. And I think there's a fundamental misconception that jobs created in the public sector and private sector are equal. Government as an entity is a cost center. We need to recognize you can only afford big government at 40% of GDP if you've got the most extraordinary economy in the world, which we don't have right now. So it's a luxury which we can't afford. So I may want to go shopping at Harrods, but I may not be able to afford it. And frankly, it's not austerity. It's called living within your means.
Right. And just the last minute or so we've got left, because you alluded, Megan, to the idea, which I tried to bring up with our politicians earlier, which is we aren't in control of our destiny because we are so interlinked, which may be a good thing in good times, but it's not a great thing now.
No, certainly not now for the UK, given its exposure to the Eurozone. And I think the Eurozone will unravel, so I have quite a bearish view. I don't think it will happen this year. I think it will probably start at the end of next year, which could give the UK a bit of a window to try to support growth more. So I think we'll see growth in the UK of 0.5% this year, maybe 1.5% next year. The longer we can buy time on the Eurozone, the better it is for the UK.
Do you agree broadly with that? Because there was also some good news from the United States, for example. So the January unemployment figures, unemployment going down, so things are looking up in the United States.
Correct, but that is precisely because they haven't adopted austerity policies. That is a case where this hasn't happened. Now, I entirely disagree. I think big government is not a luxury. Big government is a necessity precisely when you're in trouble because the private sector failed. Now, the idea that we're going to get out of this just by... No, it's not.
Where did the housing crisis come from? This came from Clinton in the mid-1990s, government policy changing and saying that every American should own a home. It was government intervention in the mortgage industry that drove that bubble, and that's been documented again.
Well, we're not going to go in detail, but this is entirely incorrect.
Okay.
Never mind.
We don't agree about that. Now, we're continuing our week of reports marking 1 year after the Arab Spring began, with Bahrain tonight, where unrest, which started a year ago today, was savagely and speedily put down, but it's not gone away.